The Absolute Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Absolute Podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine Templin, online coach, personal trainer, bikini competitor pro. In today's episode, we have a very niche episode I'm going to be talking about, but I think it's still very much so worth doing an episode on because I not only do pole dancing, teach pole dancing, but I have a lot of clients who are pole dancers, dance in the club, of all sorts. So I want to be talking about how to get better at pole dancing and how to progress with that. So there's a few things that we can do, and if there's the best piece of advice that I could give you is approach it very similar to the way that you would approach to your physique and then progressing in the gym. Very, very similar. Now, to give you guys, I guess, a bit of a background, because I know this is kind of an episode that people might find me from and might come to this episode not knowing who I am. So I am a coach, PT, mostly specialize in lifestyle clients and bodybuilding. But once again, I've coached so many pole dancers, strippers, everything over the years as well. And then of course me coming from dancer background as well, I am quite involved in like the pole industry as well as the fitness industry. I love it. It's a big passion of mine. I have a pole and a lyra at home, and I run workshops and do privates as well. So I've done pole for over 6 years, I think maybe over 7 even, on and off with some breaks. Now, so that's pretty much my kind of pole dancing, I guess, journey. I probably sit around the pre-advanced kind of level. And for me, I started off in a studio. So I started my dance journey in a studio, in a pole studio, which has been really, really great. But I've been self-taught for the past couple years now, which I absolutely love. So self-taught, I learn all the tricks myself now, just kind of watching videos online. And then now I also do privates with different instructors for myself, also being a student, which has also been really, really great. So I do this week, I've had 3 different privates with all different instructors because they're all amazing. I want to learn from them all. However, they're from 2 different studios and one's online. They're all absolutely fantastic. Just because I want to go there learning one particular thing, right? And at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know. So that's kind of basically where I'm at with my dancing. And for me, it's very much a hobby. I don't really care for competing in pole comps. I will probably enter a pole comp this year, so I'm sure I'll do that at one stage depending whereabouts I'm living. But it's, I'm not necessarily, it's not my goal to compete at a professional level per se at this stage. Definitely will compete in probably an amateur kind of level, which I know I'll be feeling super confident to do so when that time comes. I was going to do this time and then broke my toe, can't wear heels, so issue there. So yeah, basically that's kind of my pole journey. I do have like a pole fitness page as well, so I'll link that below if you're interested. It is on private, so you'll have to request to follow. But yeah, that's kind of where I document that separate little side business, which for me is just a complete hobby. Fitness, PT, nutrition, that is my main priority. And will always be first and foremost. Going to the gym is first and foremost for me, and then pole dancing is just an extra little hobby as well. Which, if you are listening to this and say, for example, maybe you're one of my clients already and you've never done pole dancing, okay, I'm actually quite interested, then honestly give it a go. I think every girl should experience dancing and understand what it feels like to actually get in her feminine side of things, when it comes to having a separate hobby. Because gym training, obviously, I highly recommend well and truly, but it's quite a masculine thing to do. And if you're a female and you are just in your masculine energy 24/7, you're going to work and then you're going to the gym and then you come home and you're wondering why you're butting heads with your partner, for example, maybe you should just have a little hobby to yourself that makes you feel super great, super girly, and you're gonna be feeling a whole lot more relaxed as a result. So I would highly recommend it if you've never danced before. But getting back in terms of actual tips in terms of what has helped me and what's also helped my clients, because the pole dancer clients that I do have, they're professionals. Like, they compete professionally, they are absolutely incredible, they're all instructors, and I've had experience of doing this for years. Like, I've trained professional pole dancers face to face, I train pole dancers all online, so all sorts of pole dancers I've coached. So when it comes to progressing with your pole dancing, there's a few things that I can say. And obviously, like I said before, number one thing is making sure that you are approaching it a similar way to the gym. Okay, so we want to be consistent with it, we want to be treating it as if it is something that needs nurturing and like, it's a skill that needs to be developed. So that being said, though, they play hand in hand. So if you're someone who also does have physique goals, which is probably 90% of us, especially if you're here on this podcast, you're going to want to create a schedule that works well for you. So depending on where you're at regarding your calories and your phase of whether you're in a fat loss phase or a build phase, that will depend in terms of how much you're actually able to train. Because I know for me, when I'm in contest prep for bodybuilding, those like last 8-10 weeks of contest prep, there is no way you would find me dancing when I'm on such low calories, I'm on such high cardio as is, I'm in the gym so much already. Pole for me is the first thing to go when I'm in a contest prep. But when I'm in my off season, I'm able to do kind of balance it all, right? So depending where you're at in your phase, like maybe if you're towards the end of a deficit, it's probably not going to be realistic or great from a recovery standpoint to be able to do so much training. But if you're in your off season, or if you're in a build phase and you've got an abundance of calories to be able to fuel and allow for that recovery, then I would definitely recommend taking advantage of that. That's the thing, as a pole dancer, you are a performance-based athlete. It's very much quite similar in a sense of how we would approach, say, like a powerlifting client or a Olympian client, for example. So we want to be treating you as a performance-based athlete. Whilst you might have physique goals, if your main priority is pole dancing, you're going to want to make sure that you're fueling for that training. That being said as well, though, there's so many aspects into it as well, because monitoring your weight, and obviously, yes, eating in like a surplus or a slight maintenance is going to be ideal, from staying fueled to have the energy to be recovering quicker, to ensure that your training for your pole dancing is going to be as sufficient as possible. But then again, if you're gaining too quickly, then you're going to notice that on the pole for when you're lifting yourself up. It's like the difference of me, for example, when I'm doing pull-ups in a contest prep versus like me now being, say, like 10 kilos heavier from when I would be at my lightest. That's an extra 10 kilos to have to pull yourself up. That's a lot harder than when I'm at the end of a contest prep. I can absolutely throw myself up, chuck on some weight even, and it's fine. So same kind of thing. If you gain even just like a kilo, especially when you're, relatively small female and you're, dancing, if you gain a kilo, you're going to probably notice that. So you also want to kind of take that into consideration. But for the most part, if you can eat at a good maintenance or slight surplus, it's going to be the best thing for you when it comes to dancing. So find a schedule that works well for you regarding the gym and your pole schedule, especially if you do still have physique goals, because you want them to be able to work hand in hand. Pole dancing works a very different set of muscles to the gym, so it's completely up to you, and this is why individualization is so incredibly important, especially depending if that client is a pole dancer as well. Because if you're a pole dancer and you also go to the gym, okay, what's the biggest priority for you? Do you, one, only care about your pole performance? So then your gym training is going to look very different than someone who also has aesthetic goals. Because if your only focus is dancing and progressing your strength in pole, then your training in the gym is going to look very different from if you do have aesthetic goals. they're different exercises. If you have aesthetic goals, you're going to be doing things that aren't super necessary to progressing in pole. So it just depends. You can look at, with your gym training, you can structure it two different ways. For me personally, because pole is not my only goal, I don't really structure my gym training at all around pole. I know I can get a lot stronger at pole if I were to do that, but for me, I have aesthetic goals. So I spend a lot of my time in the gym just focused on aesthetics and building the physique that I want. So things that I'll be working on will be, for example, I'll be doing more leg work, or even for my upper body days, I'll be working on more like shoulders, or like just like direct isolation work. But when you're pole dancing focus and you want to structure your gym training towards being a pole dancer, you might do some things that people might look at as a little bit weird. For example, one of my pole girls, she's still she's probably like intermediate level when it comes to pole dancing. And she still has aesthetic goals, but still very much so wants to focus on pole. So we do a little bit of a 50-50 split regarding her training. So for example, I'll do a lot more push-pull split for her, even incorporating things like handstands, and doing like handstand push-ups, like just against a wall, because that's going to help with that push-pull, especially with things like Aisha's. And, if you're a pole dancer, you know what that is. And then, rotator cuff exercises, doing things with a band. If you're watching some video content on video form, then you'll see what I mean. But having a band, pulling it out, and then, doing all different things like that, for example. So, whereas a bodybuilder would not necessarily be doing these kinds of things. So, different. And doing more body weight things as well in the gym. So yeah, for me, I really don't care for pole dancing. To improve solely my pole dancing. When I'm in the gym, I'll focus on aesthetics. But I might incorporate a couple have a training program that suits you. So you might need to look at your schedule. And once again, if you don't have someone to be able to create a schedule for you who understands both sides of things, I might know a girl who can do that, aka me. You can reach out to me on Instagram if you like. But yes, if you don't know how to write a program that suits you, literally get a coach to do that for you. That's why we have coaches who can look at this, especially looking at it objectively, and having that second set of eyes as well is so incredibly important. So that's the main thing. And then as well, eating, as I said, treating yourself as a performance-based athlete is important, because you're going to notice a massive difference in terms of your energy and how quickly you're progressing if you're eating sufficiently or not. And as well, protein is such a simple thing, but sometimes we can forget it. 1.4 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo body weight. But I always like my clients to sit on the high end. So general rule of thumb, 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight is what you're going to be wanting to sit at. So for most people, it's going to be between 120 to 160 grams of protein if you're a female, obviously depending on your body weight. So making sure that you're eating enough, because if you're not, you're just going to be limiting yourself so much more when it comes to the muscle that you can be building and the recovery as well. Because the sooner you can recover, the sooner you'll be back in the gym, back on the pole, being able to continue to progress. So recovery is such a big thing. Like, I'm so big on rest. And just because you can train every day doesn't necessarily mean you should. And the more calories that you give yourself, the better that you're going to be able to recover. So that goes as to what I was saying before. For me, my recovery is really good at the moment because I'm actually eating enough. So I can easily afford to train 5 days a week in the gym, do all my steps, do any kind of extra cardio, and still pole dance like 4 times a week. And pole and train on the same day. But my recovery can allow for that. Whereas if I was in contest prep, you wouldn't even find me doing 1 pole session a week. It's just unrealistic. So have a schedule that works well for you. Look at your calories, look at your rest, look at your training, and be consistent. I think that's the main thing as well, is just being consistent. It takes time. And pole dancing, as much as there is so much strength work that is involved, it's also learning the positioning of your body, because you can be the strongest person in the world, but if you don't know how to position yourself on the pole, then you're not going to be able to do the trick. So have an instructor, whether you do classes, privates, self-teach. Even if you do self-teach, I'd recommend just getting a private here and there as you can. And at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. So always be a student no matter what. Learn the positioning, don't injure yourself, because that's the last thing that you want to do. Otherwise, you're going to be putting yourself out of action for a very long time. Can stay consistent when it comes to your dancing. At the end of the day, you know, time's going to pass anyway. And it's just like with anything, if we want to get good at a particular skill, it's just going to take time and practice. And what you put in is what you'll get out. And you'll progress very, very, very quickly, and a lot quicker than others. Like, that's why you see some people, they'll stay at a same particular level for so long, because they just won't necessarily be consistent. And that's the thing with pole is, you know, you start for 1 week and you can literally see the difference in terms of the tricks and what you're able to do. It's unlike the gym where, you know, the gym, no, even if you have time off, you'll still have that muscle memory. So when you do come back to the gym, you might be a little bit weaker, but before you know it, you'll be lifting the same weights. Poles are very different. Once you start from the scratch, once you lose it, you have to kind of start from the bottom. So just stay as consistent as you can. If there's one thing that I can recommend, is to try and not have breaks. And even if you don't have a break for long. That's probably the main thing that I would say, because you can lose it quicker than what you gained the skill in the first place. It's the crappy thing about pole, and any pole dancer in the world will tell you the same thing. If you have a break, you're going to lose it really, really quickly. So you need to stay on top of your practicing. So those are the main tips that I would give when it comes to how to get better at pole dancing and complementing your gym schedule to suit your dancing. Of course, if anyone has any questions, my DMs are open, so feel free to DM me any questions around that. But otherwise, I'm going to leave this podcast episode here. Thank you guys all so much for watching.
The Absolute Podcast.